Welcome to Frame Dropped. The Last of Us Part 2 is arguably one of the most controversial video game releases of all time. People either love it or utterly hate it. I haven't made a video in quite a while, but I've just finished the game and just wanted to share my opinion from a filmmaker's view. All you have to do if you're interested is to keep watching and maybe to keep an open mind. First things first, having a background in filmmaking doesn't entitle me more than anyone else to have an opinion on the game. Films, games, music and every other type of art form is mostly subjective and is mostly made for everyone. This is just my take and my take alone. There are different opinions for every work of art, which kind of is the beauty of art forms in the first place. I'll try a different approach here. I don't think that it's necessary to talk about specific plot details to bring my point across, as you could argue in favor or against anything that happens simply depending on if the direction of the story makes you feel emotionally invested or not. But bear with me, because there could still be some interesting points here, even if you're just upset about a specific story moment. I'll address the controversy, but there won't be any story spoilers here, and the footage you'll see has only been taken from the promotional material that has officially been available before the game's release. Okay, so right off the bat, I basically enjoyed the major story arc surrounding The Last of Us Part 1 more than the story of Part 2, and I can understand a lot of the constructive criticism, with an emphasis on constructive, towards the sequel. But everything else, the gameplay, the atmosphere, pacing, acting, sound design, and also some specific story beats, are all worlds better in The Last of Us Part 2, at least in my opinion. There are some odd design and story choices that I couldn't get quite behind though, but then I watched the Kinda Funny spoiler cast with the director Neil Druckmann and Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, who are the actors portraying Ellie and Joel respectively. And that helped me understand some of the creative choices the team made. I can highly recommend the video and put the link in the description below if you're interested. But I genuinely enjoyed the game and was emotionally invested in the story and the characters. For me, it was an exceptional experience. So if we're talking about the whole game, The Last of Us Part 2 is probably the game that I will more likely want to pick up and play through again in the future. If you'll try to keep an open mind, I will tell you why that is, and I'll also try to answer why so many people dislike the game, or why it's so extremely polarizing. And again, I understand a lot of the criticism. We can probably all agree that the creative director Neil Druckmann decided to create a bold and unconventional story. And I can't imagine that nobody thought about a possible controversy that would erupt among the gaming community. Projects of that scope, be it in film or game development, are planned meticulously and worked on for a long time, with lots of people, all while burning lots of money. So nothing is really random, everything is planned. When Naughty Dog started to work on the Left Behind expansion, they already figured out the major story beats for Part 2, so the company worked on The Last of Us Part 2 for about 7 years. But why did Mr. Druckmann decide to greenlight and develop this specific story? Among many others, this Reddit user, whose name I'm not even trying to pronounce, has what I think a pretty good explanation. The easy answer is, it was his story to tell. The complicated answer, it was his story to tell, not ours. So what does that mean? In the film industry, there are not always but mostly two different kinds of productions. There are productions which mostly have the goal to generate as much revenue as possible. These films are often multi-million-dollar productions and try to appeal to as many people as possible. For example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe would fall under that tag. These films have the difficult task to not do anything too bold and use too unconventional story methods in order to appeal to a mass audience, while still doing fresh things in order to keep the audience invested. On the other hand, there are films that tell personal stories and put the vision of the writer or director above anything else. So the goal is not to please as many people as possible, but rather to show a different view of something that in some cases might only appeal to a smaller group. These films are often lower budget art house films, and understandably so. they are often too high of a risk for a major studio. But that correlation isn't always the case. There are low-budget films that try to appeal to everyone, and there are also many big-budget studio productions that try something different and unconventional, such as many Tarantino or Nolan films. But there's one huge difference between films and gaming. The film audience is used to both of these types of films. The majority of the gaming audience isn't. And although I think that there are a couple of story flaws in The Last of Us Part 2, I also think that history will be kind to Naughty Dog's game, because it tries and implements many things that have not really been done before in gaming, or even in Hollywood, to be frank. And therefore that might be an important step towards a world where a more sophisticated use of the art form video game is in place. And sometimes that might mean to differ greatly from what everyone expects from an established franchise. And yes, the backlash would have probably been almost non-existent if they would have told a story about completely different characters in the world of The Last of Us and not about Joel and Ellie. But there's probably no debate that this way the game generates stronger emotions in the audience, both positive and negative. Does that mean that you can't genuinely dislike the story of this game? No, of course you can. If the story doesn't create an emotional response, or if it just doesn't appeal to you, it is more than legitimate that you voice your opinion. I'm doing the same thing here. There are a lot of themes that this game explores, and if you ask 10 people who played it what the story is about, you'll probably get 10 different answers. For me, the story is mainly about obsession and how it can consume you. Because of that and many other themes that it explores, the game appeals to me on a very personal, emotional level, and that's why I greatly enjoyed it. If you have a different feeling, that's okay. I also sometimes dislike games or films that are widely acclaimed because they just don't appeal to my emotions or understandings, or just to things that I like. I just think that it's not fair to review bomb anything because you dislike specific story plots, and that's a whole other story for a different time. But a 0 out of 10 suggests one of the worst games ever made. Even if the story is extremely bad in your opinion and sours your taste, the gameplay, graphics, even just the range of accessibility options wouldn't warrant a 0. And that's why it's not bad that professional reviews exist in tandem with user-generated opinions. Are they always right? Of course not, but who is? But what do you guys think? Tell us in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content in the future. Until then, see you next time.